So we're about to reach the highlight of conference, the conference raffle. Hope you all bought a ticket. So I will draw the raffle.
I'll tell you what the prizes are. First prize is a 5-door Peugeot 208 Active. Second prize is £2,000. Third prize is £1,000. Here we go. And the winner is Derek Mackay. Of course not. So the first prize is Mr. Alexander Robinson from Isle of Skye. Well done. Now, second prize, £2,000, is Mr. Michael Hawthorne from Glasgow. And third prize of £1,000 is Mr. Thomas Welsh from Perth. Congratulations.
So we have your contact details to the 3 lucky winners, and we, Ian McCann, headquarters, will get in touch with you. So congratulations. We now turn to resolution 21, Scotland's fishing industry, to be proposed by Stuart Stevenson, MSP, and seconded by Marie Todd, MSP. Please welcome Stuart Stevenson, who is today celebrating his 70th birthday.
As I spent 30 years in computers, I count in hexadecimal, I'm 46. Convener and colleagues, today we read of the UK Tory Prime Minister recognising the plight of Nissan workers in the northeast of England, rightly recognising the fallout of Tory political misjudgments. Today we have heard nothing from a Tory Prime Minister about the needs of fishing communities in the northeast of Scotland and beyond. Fishermen whose rights were taken away when the Tories took us into the common fisheries policy. We in the SNP opposed the common fisheries policy from the outset. My first speech in Parliament 15 years ago was on the CFP. It's a policy that sees the majority of the fish caught in our waters being loaded into the holds of foreign vessels. A policy that diverts economic benefit of fish caught in our waters away from our communities. A policy that sees our government able to stop fishing when conservation requires, but only to stop Scottish vessels fishing, not able to stop vessels from, for example, Spain. Fishermen agree that an appropriate fishing policy is driven by conservation, economic development, and good food policy. The CFP promotes none of these effectively. When people in fishing communities voted in June, they did not, repeat not, buy into xenophobic hatred, sign up to a hauling of the drawbridge up, support any proposal to leave the market and damn the consequences, or any other proposal emanating from the Tory extremists. They were on the same policy page as us, with our arguments dating from the days of the late SNP MEP Alan McCartney, who campaigned tirelessly for the return of local control and local benefit from the catching of wild fish. But of course, fishing is more than simply catching. Fish processing workers are under threat from an exit from the single market. The EU is the most valuable market for fish in the world, and the species they take are the most valuable from our catches. Any tariff, any administrative barrier that distances us from our markets would be deeply damaging. And labour from across mainland Europe and beyond is also vital. The secondary schools in my constituency have a couple of dozen languages. People who have come here to work to fill the gaps that our local labour force cannot polish. Dentists, skilled workers in fish factories, we welcome you, and you are making critically important contributions to our economy and to our culture. How are our fishing interests being protected now? We expect, and of course we are getting support from all the ministerial team, especially from Fergus Ewing, our Fisheries Minister, and now from Mike Russell, our Negotiations Minister. By contrast, the UK Tory government's Brexit committee may have a wee bit of a wee Manny, their sole Scottish MP, to provide a fig leaf of cover, appearance, not reality, in the difficult negotiations to come. Now, he is a man with whom I have a reasonable personal relationship. But sorry, David, you are a man with no relationship to fishing interests. We need to think bigger. We need to think more effectively. The future of the fishermen of Newlyn, as well as the fishermen of our northeast, the fishermen of England's West Country, as well as the fishermen of our west coast, are all at risk of another sellout of fishing interests at the hands of the Tories, at risk of access of our fishing grounds being handed back to Spain in exchange for some broader support on an issue of much less importance to our fishing communities. We need a minister leading fishing negotiations for whom fishing is of central importance, not merely a peripheral issue. And the minister that can most effectively discharge that responsibility? It has to be a Scottish minister leading for all the fishing interests in the UK.
Nearly time, Stuart.
There's nothing novel about that. I used to lead for the UK when I was in environment councils on issues in particular with Spain. Fishing has been central to the history of many Scottish communities. It has to be central to their future as well. It's a cruel industry. There's a little chapel in Buckie, which is a large number of plaques commemorating people who've been lost at sea in the industry. Don't let the next plaque on the wall be a memorial to the loss of our fishing industry.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. Next speaker will be Marie Todd, MSP. And Marie, remarkably, is a first-time speaker at conference. To be followed by, Marie will second the resolution, to be followed by Jerry Fisher, who will move the direct negative. And can I remind all speakers, stick to time, or I will cut you off. You've all had your warnings. And you agree with me, don't you, conference? Nothing personal, Marie, but on you go.
I'm delighted to speak to this conference today for the first time as an MSP for the Highlands and Islands. The region I represent stretches from Kintyre up to Shetland and contains some of the richest fishing grounds in Europe. The Shetland Islands alone land more fish than England, Northern Ireland and Wales combined, and is a bigger contributor there to the economy than the oil industry. I grew up in the West Highlands in Ullapool, which is still one of the 10 major fishing ports in the UK, and I share the fishermen's fury with the common fisheries policy. I believe it has been a disaster for the fishing communities of Scotland, for the fishermen and for the fish. Growing up in Ullapool, I know that the coastal community suffered as a direct result of the UK's government signing us up to this flawed common fisheries policy. Yet despite this, the people of Shetland, people in Ullapool and many communities I represent all voted to remain in the EU. Why? Because we know it was the UK government's failure to represent our interests that resulted in the common fisheries policy, which didn't protect them. And We know that the same UK government is likely to repeat this neglect. Fishing to a Westminster government is expendable. Do any of us seriously believe that fishing rights in Scottish waters will take precedence over passporting arrangements for London's financial sector? The UK government, just recently, the UK government didn't support an emergency towing vessel for the Western Isles, despite that recent oil rig disaster. This is a clear signal of how little they value our coastal communities. The SNP values these communities. We want them protected. In 2014 alone, Scotland exported over £460 million of seafood to other EU countries. That was 60% of all of our food exports to the EU, and many fragile communities in the Highlands and Islands depend on this export market. With negotiations coming up, we know only the Scottish Government will stand up for Scotland's fishing communities, because only the Scottish Government will stand up for the Scottish people. Confidence, that is what this resolution is about. Standing up for fishing is standing up for Scotland. Please support the resolution.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Jerry Fisher will move the direct negative, to be followed by Fergus Ewing MSP, who will speak in favour of the resolution. And Ailey Whiteford, please stand by. Jerry Fisher.
Conference, Jerry Fisher, Oban and Lorne. I move the direct negative to this resolution for the simple reason that it represents weasel words. This resolution doesn't mean a damn thing, and Stuart Stevenson knows it. It doesn't, in fact, say that we could get out of the CFP. It doesn't say that we could get a derogation from the CFP, because he knows that we couldn't. And when Marie says the English government failed on the CFP, she doesn't know, seemingly, that the CFP was introduced for the first time into the European Economic Community the same day that Britain and Norway applied to join the EEC. In fact, the CFP was one of the conditions already there when we joined the CFP, and has been controlled by the majority of the CFP since. And any idea that Spain will not veto any move by Scotland to look after its fishing industries is flying in the face of reason. One of the reasons that Spain wanted to be in the EEC and then the EU was because of the fishing policy, where the Spanish fisheries industry could get into the North Sea, which it couldn't before it joined this EU and Britain was in the EU. The simple fact of the matter is that this is a resolution similar to many others in this conference, where effectively this party, or the leadership of this party, has abandoned its belief in Scottish independence, has abandoned. You may say not.
Jerry, can I just say, Jerry, I've given you the right to speak. Can I ask you to show respect to your fellow party members?
It's something which no one has ever managed to prove to me.
I'll just say again that, I'll call people that are entitled to speak. All I ask of you is you show respect to every other party member in this party. And I'm delighted to welcome Fergus Ewing, Cabinet Secretary, to speak in favour of the resolution, to be followed by Ailey Whiteford. Fergus Ewing.
Convener, friends, first of all, could I express a warm, personal, heartfelt thanks to my predecessor, Richard Lochhead, for 9 years of sterling, unstinting service to the party. Fishing, as we've heard from Stuart Stevenson, is part of what makes our country. It's part of our culture, part of our history. It's shaped our communities around the land, and it's absolutely essential that we give it our full support. So what do we need now? We need more new entrants coming in to own vessels, younger people. We need more fish that are caught to be landed in Scotland and to be processed here. We need to have continued access to the biggest market of all, the EU, worth £400 million. And we need access to that, Jerry, without tariffs. We need more powers over fishing transferred to Scotland, powers that were promised to us recently. And we need the EU citizens who faithfully, voluntarily work in Scotland, in processing and offshore on vessels. We need these EU citizens to be made welcome as they are by us, not used as pawns in a Brexit parlour game. Over the past 5 months that I've spent as the Cabinet Secretary for Fishing, I have seen at first hand that many of the problems arise not from the EU, they arise from the inertia and disinterest of the UK government. For example, a deal involving a very simple swap of monkfish quota, patently in the interests of Britain and Scotland, took 3 months to deliver when it should have taken 3 days. For example, a concordat agreed in March by my predecessor with the UK government promising administrative powers to be transferred in Scotland. The agreement in March, in principle, has been held up. It's still not delivered because they just don't care. Ladies and gentlemen, just 3 weeks ago in the Scottish Parliament, everybody except the Conservative Party agreed the proposition that Scotland should be fully involved in the forthcoming negotiations. But the Tories couldn't even bring themselves to vote for that modest proposition. Now, what was said in the EU referendum? Well, before the referendum, many, including the current UK Fisheries Minister, George Eustace, promised Scotland many things. Do you remember? They said that vote leave and we will pass power over fishing and farming to Scotland. Do you remember that? It's there in black and white. That's what they said. They said it in Peterhead. They said it all over the country. What did David Davis say last week in the House of Commons? He said, "We haven't addressed that yet." So, can we trust Tory cabinet members to deliver for Scotland, for our fishing communities? I think I know what your views are about this. Will they deliver for fishing communities such as in Pittenweem, Peterhead, Scalloway, or Kinlochbervie? Could they even place them on a map? In fact, if we asked the average Tory cabinet minister about Kinlochbervie, they would probably think we were talking about an obscure member of the House of Lords. Perhaps ennobled as a Tory crony in some crooked honours list in years gone by. Good old Kinloch. Well, delegates, all the evidence of the past decades, as well as the past few months since Brexit, shows that we cannot trust the Tories to deliver for Scotland's fishing interests. And for the Tories, Scotland's fishing communities were, in the 70s, as we now know, revealed from the Official Secrets Act, expendable. Nothing since then has changed. David Davidson, Boris Johnson, Liam Fox, the 3 Tory Brexiteers, are all promising that full English Brexit, and Scottish fish is not on their menu. So, to conclude, in the coming months and years, I pledge to visit every fishing community in Scotland. Mike Russell and I are visiting Islay, and we'll speak to fishermen on Monday. And we will continue to meet and work as we've done with all their representatives. I'm meeting the SFF every month at the moment. And what I want to do now is to pledge to you what I have pledged to them. I and the Scottish Government shall be the champion of Scotland's fishing interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fergus. Ailey Whiteford MP to speak in favour of the resolution, to be followed by Kate Forbes, MSP, to speak in favour. Ailey.
Conference. Fishing is the very lifeblood of the communities that I'm privileged to represent in Banff and Buchan. In the 1970s, when the UK joined the then EEC, the fishing industry was betrayed by a UK government that considered them expendable. That sellout has had enormous repercussions over recent decades, compounded by the failures of a common fisheries policy that's really not fit for purpose. It's caused enormous social, economic and environmental damage, and even with recent reforms it remains deeply flawed. It cannot be right that more than half of the fish in Scottish waters is being caught and landed by foreign vessels, and we should not be afraid to say that. But it also really shouldn't surprise us that so many people in our fishing communities voted to leave the EU. Their reasons are not so hard to understand. They look enviously at their neighbours in Norway and Iceland, who speak for themselves in crucial negotiations and defend their own interests from outside the EU but within the single market. And I think that's a crucial point, because I don't believe for one second that all those folk who voted for Brexit voted to be dragged out of the single market. Most people understand that it's overwhelmingly in the interests of all our food producers to have access to the international trade. And our membership of the single market brings that for us. For many people, that's a more important question than whether or not they're part of an EU member state or not. Last year, almost 80% of Scotland's fish and seafood exports went to EU countries. That's fish worth over £438 million. From outside the single market, we would almost certainly face hefty tariffs and perhaps even more damaging non-tariff barriers. They would reduce our competitiveness, and it would be an absolute bonanza for our competitors in the north. They can export to the EU as of right. Outside the single market, our processing sector in particular faces real uncertainty and acute labour shortages. Even some of the most ardent Brexiteers I've met in the fishing sector have told me that they support the benefits of freedom of movement and what that brings to the industry. Thousands of EU citizens are now working in our fish factories, living in our communities, most of them from the Baltic states, with whom we've had ancient trading relationships over many centuries, Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. Many of them have now married and settled here. But the current uncertainty over their future status, the toxic rhetoric we've had in the media and in Parliament on immigration, and the rise in hate crime is causing enormous anguish and distress. I think we need to say to these people very loudly and clearly, you're welcome in Scotland. We value your contribution, and we recognise the role you play in sustaining our industries, and not least in anchoring local jobs in our rural communities. We will fight to defend your rights, just as we will fight for all our other citizens. Conference, amidst the current chaos and economic turmoil of Brexit, there's a window of opportunity to redress the historic injustices perpetrated in our fishing communities. But there are also risks that a hard Brexit that drags us out of the single market would cause untold damage to our onshore industry. Our fishing grounds are an abundant natural resource, and we've had duty to manage them sustainably and in the interests of our people. We need to fight for our own interests, for the interests of our fishing communities, and never, ever again let our London Tory government use our fishermen as an expendable bargaining chip. Please, Conference, support the resolution.
Thank you, Ailey. Final speaker is Kate Forbes, MSP. Welcome, Kate.
Good afternoon. I want to start by paying tribute to our fishermen, to the Scottish fishermen, the trawlers, the creelers, the boats who fish out of Malig and Och, Kyle and Kylakin, who are out there in the wind and the rain and the cold, who are out in the boat when we're tucking into our comfy, cosy beds on a stationary house, who source the seafood which Scotland is so reputed for. Our fishermen contribute enormously to Scotland's economy, and we must ensure that we stand up for them. They face the challenges of the weather, they face the challenges of the markets, and at the moment they are facing great challenges with the common fisheries policy. It is flawed. A fisherman who not only has to catch and source fish is faced with the prospect of huge amounts of paperwork, of making sure that they meet precise targets, and those are additional pressures that they do not need. And yet, with 60% of Scottish fish landings happening in Scotland, for decades the Westminster government has failed to prioritise Scottish fishermen, has failed to speak up for Scottish fishermen in Europe, and has absolutely failed to protect Scottish fishing communities. And at a time like this, when we are looking at the prospect of negotiating a deal south of the border, we need to make sure that this party is not a party that has forgotten fishermen, but is a party that makes sure that fishermen and their interests are at the heart of any future deal for Scotland and the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. We now move to the summing up. I call Jerry Fisher to sum up for the direct negative, to be followed by Stuart Stevenson to sum up for the resolution.
Jerry Fisher, Conference. Before I start my 2 minutes, may I say...
No, you have started.
Before I start, may I say to the convener on his comment that I have total respect for my leadership. That doesn't mean to say that I agree with them. I've disagreed with them and respected them for longer than you have, lad. The point that's been made by the people speaking for the resolution is effectively that the British government, the English government, has failed the Scottish fishing industry. The fact of the matter is that 40 years ago, this SNP opposed the CFP, and essentially nothing has been done about it. And the Scottish independent government could do very little about it. What does Scottish independent government mean? It means laws enacted in Scotland for Scotland are made by a Scottish Parliament and judicially enacted by a Scottish court. Membership of the EU and the CFP means that laws are enacted by the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament, in which we have even less percentage votes than in the UK government, and they are adjudicated upon by a European court, which is not even a judicial court, it's a political court. Don't
That's
tell
nearly
me
2 minutes, Jerry.
that you can be independent and a member of the EU. It's factually rubbish.
Thank you, Jerry. At least it was less than 2 minutes. And Jerry, can I thank you for the compliment? I don't get called a lad every day anymore, so thank you very much. And Stuart Stevenson to sum up for the resolution.
Thank you, Convener. May I gently say to Jerry, he is fundamentally wrong. After 55 years in this party, joining to support independence, I still do. And that will be true of each and every one of us in the hall here. I really don't have very much to say, because it's clear from the balance of the debate that we should continue to oppose the CFP as we did in the 1975 general election, referendum, and as we did when we joined as a UK into the EEC. I'll just close by saying one very simple thing. I've seen a weasel dragging a piece of prey across our garden that's 10 times as big as the weasel. I'll back a weasel against a bulldog any day.
Okay, delegates, cards ready, and only delegates can vote. So I'll simply call a vote in favour and against the resolution. Those in favour of the resolution, please show. Cards down. Those against, please show. Is that one or more than one? Can a few, maybe a couple? Okay, the resolution is passed overwhelmingly. Thank you. We now turn to Resolution 22, Blood Transfusion and Gay Men, to be proposed by Adam McVeigh and seconded by Ben McPherson, MSP. Welcome, Adam McVeigh.
Thank you, Derek. I'm grateful for the opportunity to reaffirm our party policy on this today. I've heard some absolutely fantastic speeches from a broad range of people, from a broad range of places, with a broad range of accents, some of them broad as well. And I think it's important that our citizenship and our civic nationalism shines through, as it always does. And citizenship's about rights and it's about responsibilities. It's about the social contract. If we get ill, if we get in an accident, we expect access to our NHS, we expect treatments, we expect operations. It's one of the rights we have. Operations cost money and they cost blood, but only 4% of people in Scotland give blood. And I'm a bit of a fundamentalist on blood donation. I think if you've got life-saving, safe blood in your veins, you should take the time a few times every year and donate, and you should be allowed to donate. The Health Minister, and I was very grateful for her actions following a motion put down in Parliament, wrote yesterday to the Advisory Committee on Blood Safety asking for restrictions on gay men to be reassessed. And I'm hopeful that logic will win the day. I'm hopeful that the Advisory Committee will respond by advising a move to a system where individuals are assessed on their own risk, their individual risk, rather than being assessed in a blanket way. It fails to maximise the number of blood donors in Scotland. To be absolutely crystal clear, blood safety comes first. In any system that we have that is transparent, that works, not everyone will be able to be a donor. But restrictions have to be effectively and reasonably set down in order to manage risk. Right now there are people in Scotland that are husbands, that are fathers, people in long-term same-sex relationships that would have to abstain from sex for 12 months because sex with their partner would deem too risky. I don't understand why that would be a risky thing. I would also not wish that on my worst enemy. 12 months without enemy. So a 12-month deferral for men having sex with men is an effective life ban on gay men donating blood. In conference, I just don't think that's acceptable in 2016 and with the need of life-saving blood that we have. If you travel to a high-risk area around the world, there's a 12-month deferral to manage that risk that you've engaged in, but we don't ban everyone who's travelled everywhere. We can create a smarter system to deal with the risks attached to sexual behaviour, just as we do with travel. This debate should be focused entirely on science, but in Northern Ireland, a country with the lowest level of HIV in the UK, only recently moved to a 12-month deferral period from their previous life ban policy. That should tell you something. That should tell you that this just isn't about the science. It just isn't about the statistics. There are other factors in terms of the decision-making process that leads to an outcome on this. So I'll just end with, please support the resolution. If you have any evidence that could be helpful in making the case to deliver change, to help the Scottish Government deliver change, please write to your MSP, please write to the Health Minister to submit that evidence. Please write to your MSP to ask them to keep at this until we have a restriction policy that makes sense. And my last request of you, conference, please, 3 little words, they're life-saving words, please give blood.
Thank you, Adam. And Ben McPherson, MSP, to be followed by Rona Mackay, MSP, to speak in favour of the resolution. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Derek. Good afternoon, conference. I'm very proud to second this resolution brought forward by Leith Branch as the first SNP MSP for the remarkable constituency of Edinburgh Northern and Leith. Our movement and our party has always been about creating a fairer, healthier, more just Scotland and a progressive and communitarian society where we help each other up and help each other in as much as possible in times of need. And in that spirit, I commend Leith Branch and Councillor McVeigh for bringing forward this resolution, and they are one of the most dynamic and proactive branches in our party. And I also commend Rona Mackay, MSP, my colleague in the Scottish Parliament, who will speak shortly, for bringing forward a motion in the Scottish Parliament on this issue. Conference, we should pass this resolution for all the reasons that Councillor McVeigh just outlined, and on the grounds of equality, a determination to help save lives, and also paramount consideration to safety. We should pass it in terms of equality because the current 12-month blanket exclusion, regardless of circumstance or protection or relationship status, seems instinctively unreasonable and unfair. We should pass it on the grounds of saving lives because more donors means more blood and more opportunity and capacity to bring that life-saving blood to individuals in need and in cases of emergency. And we should pass this resolution on the grounds of safety. The opportunity to donate should not be based on an individual's sexual orientation, but instead on individual risk, on an individual risk assessment, on risk factors, not sexual orientation. Our aim should be to remove the blanket exclusion and maintain the safety of blood transfusions. And on that point, Councillor McVeigh spoke about a letter from Cabinet Secretary Shona Robinson to the Advisory Committee on the Safety of Blood, Tissues and Organs, aka SABTO. And in that letter, I have it here, the Cabinet Secretary emphasises, which I'm sure we all agree, that the safety of blood supply is of paramount importance and should be supported by an evidence-led and risk-based approach. The Cabinet Secretary also goes on to state that she believes the review is a real opportunity to explore all restrictions and that an individualised, nuanced, intelligence-based assessment process and system would be one that we would all desire, focused on risk rather than exclusion. We should pass the resolution and aim towards to bring about such a system in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And our final speaker will be Rona Mackay, MSP, another one of our successful Scottish Parliament candidates who's an MSP and also happens to be the first time she's spoken at conference.
Thank you, Derek. Conference. Scotland has led the way in equality, and our party has an unblemished track record promoting equal rights. In 2005, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender was banned. In 2009, same-sex couples were allowed to adopt children, and in 2014, we legalised same-sex marriage. Today's resolution gives Scotland a chance to address one major area where inequality still exists, and at the same time, address a chronic lack of uptake in blood donation and the coming forward of new donors to meet our demand for blood products. On the 19th of September, I submitted a motion for debate to the Scottish Parliament, asking my colleagues to support an examination of the issues in lifting the 12-month deferral to men who have sex with men donating blood. The support for this motion has been excellent, with cross-party uptake. The motion has drawn support from all major party leaders in Scotland, with the exception of Willie Rennie. As the law stands, no men who have had sex with men in the previous 12 months, or women who have had sex with men who have had sex with men, may give blood within the 12 months deferral period. These rules have their origins in the 1980s, when little was known of the risk of HIV, the modes of contracting it, and the prevalence within specific communities. The current rules around blood donation make no reference to someone's personal risk of being a carrier of HIV, and a promiscuous straight person would be able to donate blood, while a monogamous gay or bisexual man would not. This week, the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service published an updated position on gay blood donation. Within that document, it recognises the principles of kindness and mutual trust expected of all blood donors between the individual and the blood donation service. However, the mutual trust expected by the service is not reflected in the selection and deferral criteria, evident by the fact there is no consideration of the position of thousands of gay and bisexual men in committed relationships where the risk of HIV transmission is negligible. For the sake of equality, Scotland needs to go further to ensure that all people can donate blood based on their personal risk of blood-borne virus transmission, not their sexual orientation.
Delegates, we need to introduce a new non-discriminatory risk assessment policy that will judge each individual equally, whether they are straight, bisexual or gay. I believe this would increase the number of much-needed donors throughout Scotland and address a glaring inequality. Please support this resolution.
Thank you, Rona. Now, conference, there are no cards in against. I'm sorry I can't call any further speakers. Adam, will you waive your right to sum up? You will, thank you. So can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is, thank you. And now we turn to resolution 23. Okay, we'll do resolution 23, and then we can give you the announcements for the elections to national office. So in resolution 23, devolution of driving test, it will be proposed by Ross Cassie and seconded by David Don. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Conference, Ross Cassie, Bamford Macduff Branch. The Scottish Government has control over road safety, speed limits, drink drive limits, and it will soon be able to make its own road signs. Thank you, Westminster, for your generosity. What it does not have, however, is the ability to determine the standard of the driver on our roads and deliver a driving test fit for those standards. This is not just about the car test, this is for all tests, motorbikes, large goods vehicles, passenger carrying vehicles. Through its austerity agenda, Westminster has prescribed over the last few years, underinvestment has been rife within the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. Now, communities are suffering as a result of that. The need to obtain a driving licence in some of our rural communities is a necessity. Public transport, it doesn't exist in a lot of places. There's no trains, very few buses, so people need to get about. So a driving licence is a necessity within those communities. Now, the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency at this moment in time are overseeing the biggest waiting list that I can ever remember. I am no longer a driving examiner, by the way. Just declare a slight interest there. I'll give you an example of what some of those waiting lists are. On the 2nd of August, I received information that the next available driving test in Inverurie is on the 17th of April, 2017. And this is not just a rural issue, it's urban as well, because Baillieston in Glasgow, they have waiting lists the same. This year, the DVSA are trying to recruit 30-plus examiners. That's just 30. That still will not deliver the service that our communities require. Our island communities are suffering exactly the same. This all came about as a result of some draconian terms and conditions ripping up a few years back. Basically, the DFT, Department for Transport, was told, cut your budgets. So they're stopping people going around. They are taking away all the travelling and subsistence allowances. So what happens is, driving examiners are no longer prepared to do that travelling because they're no longer getting it before. So the islands are particularly poorly serviced from Inverness, and they're now bribing examiners with a little bung every three months to go out there. So this resolution is not just about seeking the devolution of the driving test, because it goes way beyond that. This service impacts upon many aspects within our lives. In Aberdeenshire, 20% of care-at-home positions are unfilled. Yet there are many within our communities that speak to us who would like to do this but just cannot get access to a driving test. If that's replicated across the country, that's a lot of people who could be getting care at home on a more regular basis that actually need that. These are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. The current level of test provision does not allow for any of this to take place. So a conference with many of our rural communities lacking rail and having poor bus provision, a driving licence is that necessity. With limited employment in our more rural areas, many of our younger workforce will have to travel, some considerable distances, to the major urban areas for work. So it's not only social care, but it impacts upon social mobility and the economy of our country. This resolution seeks to devolve the driving test to a Scottish government, that being a government best placed to know the needs of the services within our country. That's the government that is here, not at Westminster.
Nearly time, boss.
An examiner workforce with the Fair Work Commission framework, ethics at its heart, by the way, this is an alien concept to Westminster, will provide a far better service. Support the resolution, give the economy and the services the wheels that they need to make the country run. Support this resolution.
Thank you, Ross. And David Don to second, to be followed by Lewis Esselmont. And David's another first-time speaker. Welcome, David. Your second resolution.
Thank you, Conference, Mr Convener. Fraserburgh and District Branch are pleased to second the proposal by Banff and Macduff that driving tests be devolved to the Scottish Government. With the downturn in the fishing industry and more recently the oil industry, it's more important than ever that young people be able to travel outside their own locality to try and find work, be it in the surrounding rural areas or in other towns. More importantly, Fraserburgh and the surrounding areas had its share of road accidents in the past, with young people either fatally injured or receiving a life-changing injury on the roads around the Broch, as Fraserburgh is known locally. In March 2015, the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Traffic Accidents, in collaboration with RAC, published research that showed that Banff and Buchan in the North East had the worst record for accidents where at least one individual had been killed or seriously injured in the entirety of the UK. The constituency, which includes Fraserburgh, carrying an index rating of 211, meaning the casualty rate was 111% higher than the national average. Overall, Banff and Buchan carried the worst killed or seriously injured rate in the UK and ranked first out of 632 constituencies. Research carried out by Road Safety Scotland in 2014 showed that an average of 54 accidents a week in Scotland involve a young driver aged between 17 and 25. Sadly, those accidents lead to an average of one death and more than 70 people injured every week. The RAC in 2011 also published results for the whole of the UK, showing late teens experience almost double the risk of death from road traffic accidents in comparison to the general population. Conference, young drivers are still developing and learning, even after they pass their driving test. The figures show that their age and lack of experience put them in a very at-risk group and means that they are much more likely to be involved in an accident than a more mature driver. These are facts and figures, but those facts and figures also mean lives. Young drivers waiting 6 months or more at increased expense to themselves is not acceptable. If just one young driver is tempted to get behind the wheel, alone with no co-driver, during these long waiting periods, and that results in a fatal accident, then that is just a tragedy. Young drivers need fast access to a robust examination system in all areas of Scotland that ensures they are fit to drive alone and gives them a competent and safe start to their driving, and which also enables them to find work outside of their locality. And I call on Conference to pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Our final speaker, delegates, our final speaker in this debate is Lewis Esselmont, who is a first-time speaker and, as I understand it, the youngest speaker at Conference. So welcome, Lewis.
Afternoon, Conference. I'm just going to pretend that you're all here to see me and nothing to do with Nicola being on shortly. So I'm Lewis Esselmont from Aberdeen South, and I've decided to speak on this particular issue as my first time because I feel it's an issue that people have to deal with daily. Everyone applies for driving tests all the time. And as the first person's touched on, you could be waiting until April if you apply now. Now, what's worse about that is that we've been told from the DVLA in our area in Aberdeen that you could be waiting for 5 weeks. If you try and find someone who's waiting for 5 weeks, then come see me, because no one waits 5 weeks for a driving test in Aberdeen. Now, some people may say you just have to wait your turn, but a lot of people who are learning to drive are young, like myself, and at school or university, and I've got to fit in studying at this key point in their life. So waiting, months and months for a driving test, it's just not acceptable. And this isn't just an issue for the young people, for older people as well. As the first speaker touched on, if you're from a rural community and you learn to drive, you need to get to the urban areas for work, for example. So it's not just the young people who are learning to drive, it is the older people, older people as well. Now, this issue is about taking it to the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Parliament, who have recently been given tax revenues and have made huge strides in this area, and that's my example I'm going to touch on. The Scottish Parliament have proved that particularly the last 10 years, how efficient they can be, and that they're one of the most popular governments in Europe. And I feel that the Scottish Government can do a lot better than Westminster, obviously. Holyrood makes choices for Scots, whereas Westminster are too busy fussing over whatever they're fussing about this week. Waiting months and months for months for a driving test is just not acceptable. Not in this time. I'm not even going to go on about what type of money the government are spending others on instead of trying to employ important people like driving instructors, but I'll keep that to myself. This area has to be devolved and get taken to the Scottish Parliament for a more efficient service for our young people and older people. Thank you for listening, conference, and I hope you've had a brilliant week at the SNP conference. Thank you. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Lewis. Isn't this party blessed with incredible talent right across the country? I think the thing I've said most this conference is another first-time speaker, which is just incredible. So, with no cards in against, can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is, thank you. I now call upon the National Secretary to give you the results of elections to national office. Please welcome the outgoing National Secretary, Patrick Grady.
Thank you, conference. Thank you, Derek. I have the results of the national office bearers and some of the national committees, and the national committees that I don't announce, the results will be up on the internal section of the website soon after conference. For the position of organisation convener, the votes cast were for Fiona MacLeod, 936, for Aileen Mackenzie, 417. And so Fiona MacLeod is re-elected as the party's organisation convener. For the post of National Women's and Equalities Convener, in the first round, the votes were Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, 653, Angela Crawley, 519, Irene Hood, 44, Jamie Sinkovic, 241. After redistribution of votes, Angela Crawley had 635 and Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh had 722. Tasmina is elected as National Women's and Equalities Officer. For the position of National Secretary, in the first round, the votes were Chick Brodie, 175, Angus MacLeod, 563, Graham McCormick, 203, Rhiannon Spear, 442. After the redistribution of votes, Rhiannon Spear had 539 and Angus MacLeod had 688. Dr. Angus MacLeod is the party's new National Secretary. For the National Executive, for the elected parliamentarians block, in alphabetical order, the two parliamentarians elected were Alex Salmond MP and Mary Black MP. For the 6 non-parliamentarians on the National Executive Committee, alphabetically by first name again, were elected Chris McElhenney, Dr Duncan Ross, Grant Toms, Mary Hunter, Rhiannon Spear and Tony Giuliano. And for the Standing Orders and Agenda Committee, the 6 candidates elected were Ivan McKee, Joan McAlpine, John West, Rosemary Hunter, Stuart Stevenson and Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Patrick. And congratulations to all those new elected office bearers. And thank you all to all of the voluntary office bearers that have served this party so well. Thank you. We now turn to topical resolutions. The first topical resolution on the Chokar family is to be moved by Linda Fabiani, MSP, and I'll take a formal seconder, which I have. I call Linda Fabiani. And as you can see, the resolution is displayed on the screen.
18 years ago, Surjit Singh Chokar was murdered. There were charges, there was a trial, but there was no conviction. This caused absolute outrage. There were inquiries, there were reports, debates. There was vilification of a clever young lawyer. There was recognition, though, that indeed institutional racism existed in our public services. And this led to changes in practice in the law, and we know that recently that led to a conviction. But in amongst all this, there was a family, parents who lost a son and a sister who lost a brother. It's a family that stuck with it during the pain, and that family have really made a difference. So, in moving this resolution, may I ask Conference to welcome Mrs. Chokar, Manjit Sangha, and their representative, Amar Anwar.
Conference. Conference, can I ask for your approval to depart from the standing orders of the party to hear from the family lawyer, Amar Anwar?
Thank you, Conference. Surjit Singh Chokar was the only son of Darsan Singh Chokar and Gurdev Kaur, who made Scotland their home in the 1980s. On the 4th of November 1998, Surjit, at the age of 32, a father of 2, returned home at night to Overton, Wishaw. He was attacked by 3 men, Ronnie Coulter, Andrew Coulter, David Montgomery. He was repeatedly stabbed with a knife, hit with a lead-filled baton and brutally murdered. 3 men were arrested, and the family were told not to worry, that justice would be done. But within days, 2 of the men were back out on the streets. In March 1999, only 1 man, Ronnie Coulter, stood trial, and he blamed the other 2 and was acquitted. He boasted to his family of having committed the perfect murder. For any parent, the loss of a child shatters the soul, but no one can imagine the devastating toll wreaked by having to campaign for justice through one's grief. And Surjit came to be known as Scotland's Stephen Lawrence. As a young lawyer, at the start of my career, I stood shoulder to shoulder with the Chokars as they mobilised thousands in their demands for justice. On so many occasions, I watched a mother and a father whose hearts were broken, with no tears left to shed, but Sajid's father, Darshan Singh, said he never gave up, saying that until his very last breath, he would have a hope for justice. In November 2000, a second trial took place, and two other men, Andrew Coulter and David Montgomery, were also acquitted of murder. And I stood on the steps of the Glasgow High Court, accusing our justice system of acting like a gentleman's colonial club, relatively unchanged for 400 years, arrogant, unaccountable, and institutionally racist. I can't say that made me very popular at the start of my legal career, but so began our campaign for a public inquiry, and in England, Labour in opposition had promised the Stephen Lawrence family a public inquiry, but in Scotland, whilst in power, Labour and the Liberals gave us a closed judicial inquiry. The Chokars boycotted the inquiry, condemning them as a whitewash. However, for the very first time, institutional racism was acknowledged as being at the heart of our criminal justice system. Throughout this period, the SNP was unrelenting and unconditional in its support for the Chokar family. And in particular, I want to thank 4 MSPs who supported us through our darkest hours: Rosanna Cunningham, Shona Robinson, Linda Fabiani, and Michael Matheson. We have never forgotten your solidarity and your compassion. It was in 1999 that we last spoke to the party in Inverness, myself, Mr. Chokar, and Mrs. Chokar. 17 years ago, our justice system mistook the Chokar family's quiet dignity and pain for weakness. But hidden beneath Darshan Singh's flowing white beard and a kind smile was a proud old warrior, an ex-sergeant major in the Indian Army who feared no man, and a mother who, for the love of her son, would not be pushed aside. Standing up to injustice sadly carried a heavy price, with Mr. Chokar falling ill to cancer beginning back in 2000. And as the years passed, we slowly lost hope. But in 2000, when the SNP passed the double jeopardy law, we once again had a hope for justice. I approached our Lord Advocate, Frank Mulholland, to reopen the case, and in 2014, we started once more to prepare for a new trial. Sadly, Mr. Chokar passed away from cancer last year, and 5 weeks ago, on September the 6th, Ronnie Coulter once again stood trial. On the 5th of October, he was finally convicted of murder of Sajid Singh Chokar. And finally, on the steps of the Glasgow High Court, we were able to thank today's prosecutors, Lord Advocate, Crown Office, Police Scotland, and the Scottish Government for their unwavering commitment to justice. Sajid was neither a rich or a powerful man, but he was a loving son, father, and brother who was lucky to have 2 stubborn parents and a sister Manjeet who refused to be silenced. The Chokar family symbolises for me, more than anyone I have met in my lifetime, what justice should be about. Not the vanity of wigs and gowns or a gentleman's club, but a humble family who demanded justice as a right and not a privilege. The Chokars placed The Chokar family placed victims' rights at the heart of our modern criminal justice system, and that is their cherished legacy for generations to come. Conference, there can never again be any room for complacency. We must always remember the family of all those unsung victims with little or no voice to raise the profile of their cases, and I hope a day will come in this country when the lives of our brothers and sisters and the names of Sajid Singh Chokar, Chris Donald, Stephen Lawrence, Simon San, Ahmed Sheikh, Sheku Bayo are commemorated for the lives they live rather than lose. And whilst the dead cannot cry out for justice, it is the duty of the living to do so for them. And I want to close with the words from Mrs. Chokar, who says this: "The verdict was not a cause for celebration, and my son will never return, and my husband died not seeing justice, but I know that my brave husband and my beautiful son will be at peace now that justice has been done, and for that, as a mother, I will always be indebted to your party for your love, your support, your respect, and all that you did to make justice possible." Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Conference. There are no cards in against this topical resolution. Can I ask Conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. Thank you very much. And now the second topical resolution on concentrics will be proposed by Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh and seconded by Ailey Whiteford. Welcome, Tasmina.
Thank you very much indeed, Derek. Conference, 2 months ago, my fantastic staff in my Alloa office began receiving phone calls and emails from single mothers and fathers across Perthshire, Kinrossshire and Clackmannanshire who'd had their tax credit payments stopped without warning for no good reason. Their circumstances were very similar. They had been penalised by Concentrics, a company who'd been contracted by HMRC to administer the tax credits process. Concentrics said that they believed another adult was living in the house and they were no longer eligible for payment. What was shocking and bizarre about these accusations were how clearly wrong they were. Women were accused of living with the son of the family next door or the previous tenant in their flat. Or in one case highlighted by the media, a 19-year-old single mum was accused of being in a current relationship with a 76-year-old former neighbour who had died some months before. For their payments to be reinstated, they would need to appeal this decision and send HMRC proof of their status with a range of new documentation, a year's worth of bank statements, letters from their landlords, proof of their address and relationship status, which they were to pay for out of their own pocket to prove their innocence. So I did what any decent local MP would do. I raised it in Parliament, I asked questions, wrote letters. My team called HMRC every day to chase up actions that were promised but not yet delivered. We did everything possible to help these parents in need, because that's our job, and that's what you can expect from each and every one of our SNP MPs. And what I was told directly across the House of Commons chamber by the Minister in charge was that they've solved the problem and it would now only take 4 working days to get money to those who were wrongly penalised. We're now 4 weeks on from this conference, but my constituents are still calling me desperate and increasing material hardship because of the mistakes of others and a failure of the Tory government to prioritise their growing plight. They're now telling me things will be resolved as soon as possible. So to the Tory ministers in the Treasury, I say this: soon doesn't put food on the table, soon doesn't pay for phone credit, and soon doesn't explain to a child why the tooth fairy didn't come last night. These people are desperate. I know families, Conference, who didn't send their children to school last week because they didn't have lunch money. I know of a nurse who's in danger of losing her job because she can't afford childcare. I've heard of a mum who's so worried about her situation, she signed herself out of hospital with a suspected heart attack so she could fix the mess and protect her family. This shameful situation is a national disgrace. The Tories' inability to sort this out shows a lack of competence, a lack of compassion and an utter lack of political will. They're leaving families in dire financial and emotional mess. The Tory government must act now to pay these families what's rightfully theirs and provide compensation for the innocent constituents who've been penalised because of the mistakes of others. So for Jane and her kids, for Graham and his family, and for Debbie and our loved ones who've been plunged into poverty, Theresa May, sort this out now. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasmina. And to second, Ailey Whiteford, MP. Welcome back, Ailey.
Conference, I think this Concentrics debacle reminds us all exactly why dignity and respect need to be at the very heart of our social security system. And I'm so glad and so determined that the Scottish Government is doing just that with the powers that are coming to it in the weeks and months ahead. But Conference, it is simply not acceptable for an agency employed by government to make wild, groundless fraud allegations against women in receipt of tax credits to which they are perfectly entitled, and to stop people's payments without a shred of evidence or substantiation. Let's just remind ourselves for a moment what tax credits are and who they're for. Tax credits are mostly paid to working parents of dependent children to top up low earnings and bring household incomes up to an acceptable level. Tax credits help ensure that children whose parents work in low-paid jobs don't grow up in poverty. And single parents where there's only one wage in the house are particularly in receipt of tax credits because they are more likely to be in poverty and more likely to have parents who are having to struggle to juggle work and family commitments. In Scotland, though, around half of all families with children receive tax credits, reflecting the fact that the minimum wage is not a living wage and that many parents, particularly women, work part-time when their bairns are wee. Women also tend to be overrepresented in low-paid jobs and still earn less than men on average. So the majority of those in receipt of tax credits are women, and most of them are working mums. To my mind, the actions of Concentrics have been quite disgraceful and nothing short of scandalous. Women have simply had their payments stopped, sometimes with no explanation or warning, but sometimes accompanied by spurious allegations about their personal lives. And I'm sure many of you will also have seen the media reports of some of the more ridiculous accusations, such as the woman living above a newsagent's shop who was accused of having a Baidian called R.S. McCall. Or the woman in Yorkshire who is a tenant of a housing association that was endowed by a Quaker philanthropist in the Victorian era. She was accused of being in a relationship with a Mr. Joseph Rowntree. But actually, it's extremely serious. My colleague, Chris Law MP, who first raised this issue in Parliament, has a constituent in Dundee who has lost her home. She was depending on tax credits, like so many others, to pay rent. And unlike in social housing, where you can maybe have rent arrears without the landlord taking immediate punitive action, for people in private sector rented accommodation, often there is no debate if you're not able to pay your rent. And the consequences of that for that family and thousands like them are absolutely enormous. Many other people are now depending on food parcels, resorting to expensive lending, payday loans, etc., just to get by until they believe they can sort this out. People are depending on tax credits to pay their rent and put food on the table, and losing that income without warning, due process or just cause is causing untold distress and hardship to thousands of families. It's quite disgraceful that this incompetent fishing exercise has been allowed to continue, and that the UK government has failed to reinstate payments for these families as they said they would within the time frame they promised. Well, let me send a very clear message. The SNP MPs in Westminster will hold the government to account on this issue, and we will continue to press for immediate action now to put this right. They also need to explain how this was allowed to happen in the first place. What on earth were they thinking? And when will they stop putting women and children on the front line of their failed austerity agenda? Conference, please support this resolution and send a strong message to the UK government that they simply cannot treat people in this way.
Thank you, Ely. There are no cards in against the resolution. I'm sorry I can't call any further speakers. Tasmania, are you okay to waive your right to sum up? You are, thank you. Can I ask for the last time, Conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. Thank you very much. That concludes our debates. Now, it now gives me great pleasure to welcome back to Conference the new Deputy Leader of the party, Angus Robertson, MP.
Business Convener, fellow delegates, thank you very much. And can I begin by thanking all of you who took part in the Deputy Leadership election campaign of the Scottish National Party. A huge thank you to all of the other candidates and for the constructive and positive way that the campaign was run. I think we can all be very proud as a political party about how we debate and how we decide. It is a huge honour to be able to work for you. It's also a huge honour to be able to work with our amazing, fantastic First Minister and party leader, Nicola Sturgeon. So please give a huge, rousing welcome to Nicola Sturgeon.
Delegates, we meet here in the city of Glasgow, 5 months on from the Scottish Parliament election. When we gathered back in March, we were preparing to seek election as Scotland's government for a third consecutive term. Thanks to your hard work and your campaigning brilliance, we did just that. We won the election. From the bottom of my heart, let me say this to the people of our country. Thank you for putting your trust in me as your First Minister. Thank you for choosing us to be your government. The SECC, where we meet today, was first opened back in 1985. It's witnessed quite a few changes in the 30 years since. The biggest change of all has been in the politics of our country and of this city. In 1985, a Scottish Parliament seemed like a pipe dream. Today, it is the beating heart of our democracy. We no longer question if we should have a Parliament of our own. Instead, we ask if our Parliament should be independent. We say yes. In 1985, every constituency in this city, bar one, was held by Labour. Today, the political landscape is very different. Last year, every Westminster constituency in this city was won by the SNP. This year, every Holyrood constituency voted SNP as well. And just last week, in a council by-election, a massive 19% swing to the SNP secured victory for our brilliant candidate, Chris Cunningham. Next year, we have the chance to complete this political transformation. Glasgow was once described as the second city of the empire. In the council elections next May, let's work as hard as we ever have to bring the SNP to power, and then let's build this city as one of the very best in Europe. Glasgow is a vivid illustration of the success of our party, but it also stands as a lesson. Labour lost because they took the voters for granted. They became arrogant on power. They thought they were invincible, and they rightly paid the price. So our promise to Glasgow and to all the people of Scotland is this: we will never take you for granted. We will work each and every day to earn and to re-earn your trust. Conference, it's not just attitude that distinguishes the SNP from Labour. It's policy and principle too. When Labour held its conference in Liverpool recently, its defence spokesman wanted to announce support for the renewal of Trident. He was enraged at not being allowed to go as far as he wanted in supporting weapons of mass destruction. Well, we're pretty angry too. We're angry that with so many children still living in poverty, we have a Tory government determined to waste tens of billions of pounds on a new generation of nuclear weapons. And we're angry at Labour for meekly falling into line behind the Tories. Friends, I promise you this: no one will ever have to slip a note to politicians in this party reminding us to oppose Trident, now and always with the SNP. It is no to Trident, not in our name. In the conflicts facing the world today, nuclear weapons are not the answer. In Syria, up to 400,000 men, women and children have been killed since the conflict started. Over 1 million have been wounded. No one can fail to be profoundly moved and deeply angered by the appalling scenes we are witnessing in Aleppo. Innocent children are being killed and wounded with impunity. The barbarism of the Assad regime and the actions of Russia are sickening. We condemn them unreservedly. We agree with the UN that all countries must stand up for the millions of Syrians who desperately need help. And although at times we can feel powerless, we should remember that communities across Scotland are making a difference to families fleeing the conflict. Last month, the 1,000th Syrian refugee was welcomed to Scotland, and conference, they are welcome. But we can and we must do more, especially for children alone without their parents. So I say to the UK government today, stop treating this as a migration issue. It is a humanitarian crisis. We must rise to the challenge. And Scotland is ready, and we are willing to play our part. Friends, it may just be 5 months since we won the Holyrood election, but in many ways it feels like a political lifetime. We are in a completely new era, a new political era and a new battle of ideas, a new era for our Parliament with new powers and responsibilities, and a new era for our relationship with Europe and the wider world. There are challenges aplenty, and as we face up to them, we must make sure of this: that Scotland always remains the progressive, internationalist, communitarian country that the majority of us living here want it to be at all times. Make no mistake, today we face a choice of two futures. After last week in Birmingham, there can be no doubt that choice has never been so stark. The primary contest of ideas in our country is now between the SNP and the hard right Tories. The Cameroons have fallen to the Faragistas. And let's face it, the Cameroons were never very appealing in the first place. Conference. The SNP's vision for Scotland is welcoming, progressive, open, outward-looking and inclusive. The Tory vision, xenophobic, closed, inward-looking, discriminatory. Let's be frank, the Tories are no longer the Conservative and Unionist Party. After last week, we should call them what they are, the Conservative and Separatist Party, or UKIP for short. Today's Tories display an ingrained hostility to immigration and offer a stony heart to refugees. They treat those with disabilities with suspicion. People seeking support to get back into employment are humiliated and harassed. A mother unable to find the bus fare to get to a job centre appointment is more likely to face a benefit sanction than she is to be offered a helping hand. And those from other European countries who have chosen to make their homes here, human beings with lives, jobs and families, they're treated as no more than bargaining chips. Conference, the Prime Minister's position on EU nationals shames her, and it will be a stain on her government each and every day that is allowed to continue. The fact is, with almost every action the Tories take, somebody is excluded, somebody loses out, somebody is left behind. So let us make it clear, that is not our way, it is not who we are, and it is not who we aspire to be. And what of Labour? It wasn't meant to be a joke. So lost have they become that they prefer the prospect of years of continuous Tory government at Westminster to self-government for Scotland. It is inexplicable, I know, but I guess branch offices just don't have all that much in the way of ambition. Friends, Labour may have thrown in the towel, but let me make this pledge today. The SNP will never stand by while a right-wing and intolerant Tory government undermines the very fabric of our society. At Westminster, we will continue to provide the strong opposition that Labour is failing to deliver. In recent months, it hasn't been Labour asking the hard questions about our place in the single market and the jobs that depend on it. It's been our Westminster leader, our new deputy leader, Angus Robertson. Just as it's been Alison Thewlis making the case against the immorality of denying tax credits to women unless they can prove they've been raped. And Ian Blackford standing against the deportation of the Brain family. Or Mary Black standing up for women denied the pension entitlements they have saved for all of their working lives. The SNP isn't just the real opposition to the Tories at Westminster. The SNP is the only effective opposition to the Tories at Westminster. So our job at Westminster is to provide the strong opposition that is so desperately needed, not just in Scotland, but right across the UK. And our job at Holyrood is to use our powers to build the better Scotland we all want to see. Conference, if you remember just one word from my speech today, I want it to be this one. It begins with an I. No, not that one. Not yet. The word I want you to remember is this: inclusion. Inclusion is the guiding principle for everything we do. It encapsulates what we stand for as a party, and it describes the kind of country we want Scotland to be, an inclusive country. A country where everyone has the opportunity to contribute to a better future and to share in the benefits of that better future. A country which works for those who value the security they currently have and for those who yearn for change. A country where we value people for the contribution they make, not one where we will ever judge them on their country of birth or the colour of their passport. That is the inclusive Scotland we are working to build, and I'm proud of the progress we've made. Earlier this week, a major European research study reached this conclusion: on health, on education, on tolerance, and on the environment. Out of all of the 4 nations in the UK, Scotland is top. Of course, I know there is still much to do in the next phase of Scotland's Home Rule journey. Westminster is still responsible for the majority of funding for our public services. But more than ever before, the new Scotland Act means the growth of Scotland's budget depends on the growth of Scotland's economy. Creating jobs, expanding the economy, and growing tax revenues. These priorities must be at the centre of absolutely everything we do, and they always will be. This time last year, workers at the Tata Steel plants at DL and Clydebridge faced huge uncertainty. I stood up at our conference and I promised we would leave no stone unturned in our efforts to find and secure a viable future. We worked with the company, with trade unions, with local government, and with the local community. 2 weeks ago, I returned to DL with this message for the workforce. We kept our promise, the plant is open for business, and Scotland is rolling steel once again. When I think of the many times in years gone by when Westminster governments have stood by and allowed Scottish industry to wither and die, I think about what might have been. What might have been if there had been a Scottish Parliament and a Scottish government there to fight for them. What might have been if the people of Scotland had been able to steward the immense natural resources of these lands for present and future generations, just like independent Norway did. So let us make this resolution today. Never again will we be content to look back helplessly at the damage the Tories have done to Scottish industry and wonder what might have been. We must win the power to always shape our own future. Conference, we will not just intervene to save jobs. We will also provide help and support for businesses to thrive. I can confirm today that our small business bonus will be extended. From April the 1st next year, 100,000 business premises across Scotland will pay no business rates at all, absolutely none. Our new £500 million growth scheme will offer guarantees and loans to companies seeking to export, expand and create new jobs. And we'll make sure that the benefits of growth are shared more widely. Central to that is our work to extend payment of the living wage. There are currently over 600 accredited living wage employers in Scotland. By this time next year, that number will rise to at least 1,000. That's what inclusion means in practice. We will also redouble our efforts to make sure our economy is internationally competitive. That's even more important now in the wake of the Brexit vote. Make no mistake, the threat to our economy is not just the prospect of losing our place in the single market, disastrous though that would be. It is also the deeply damaging and utterly shameful message that the Tories' rhetoric about foreign workers is sending to the world. More than ever, we need to tell our European friends that Scotland is open for business. And let me be crystal clear about this. We cannot trust the likes of Boris Johnson and Liam Fox to do that for us. So today I can announce a 4-point plan to boost trade and exports by taking Scotland's message directly and in our own voice to the very heart of Europe. Firstly, we will establish a new board of trade in the Scottish Government. Secondly, we will set up a new trade envoy scheme. It will ask prominent Scots to help us boost our export effort. Thirdly, we will establish permanent trade representation in Berlin, adding to our investment hubs in Dublin, London and Brussels. And fourthly, we will more than double the number of Scottish Development International staff working across Europe, men and women whose job it will be to market Scotland as an open economy and a welcoming society. Friends, the difference between the Scottish and Westminster governments is this. They are retreating to the fringes of Europe. We intend to stay at its very heart, where Scotland belongs. Conference, inclusive economic growth underpins our entire economic strategy. The Queensferry Crossing, our new bridge across the Forth, has been our country's most important infrastructure project in a generation. In fact, this week, it entered the Guinness Book of Records. The central tower of the bridge is the biggest freestanding structure of its kind anywhere in the world. What an amazing feat of engineering. But the most important infrastructure investment of the next few years will be different. It will be childcare. Over this Parliament, we will double the amount of state-funded early years education and childcare for all 3- and 4-year-olds and for our most disadvantaged 2-year-olds. Not a bridge over a river, but a bridge to a better future for our children. And today I can announce a new phase in this childcare revolution. Just now it's local authorities who decide what childcare places are offered to parents. Councils work really hard to be flexible, but often the places offered to parents are not where and when they need them. So today we are launching a national parent consultation on how to do things differently. It proposes radical new approaches prioritising choice and flexibility. First, we will propose that parents can choose a nursery or childminder that best suits their needs, and as long as the provider meets agreed standards, ask the local authority to fund it. In other words, the funding will follow the child, not the other way around. And second, as suggested by Children in Scotland's Childcare Commission, we will propose that parents can opt to receive funding in a childcare account and then use it to purchase a suitable place directly. Quality, choice, flexibility, these will be the watchwords of a policy to transform the working lives of families and the life chances of our children. And I am proud that it's an SNP government that will deliver it. There's another policy for our youngest children that I will be very proud to deliver. In the election, we promised a baby box of essential items for all newborns. It's a policy borrowed from Finland, where it's contributed to one of the lowest levels of child mortality in the world. So I'm delighted to give you an update on our plans to introduce it here. Next month, we will launch a competition in partnership with the V&A in Dundee for the design of the box. The first boxes will be delivered to babies born in pilot areas on New Year's Day. Now, I don't know about you, but as a first foot offering, I think that beats a lump of coal. And then, next summer, every newborn baby across our country will receive a baby box full of clothes, nappies, bedding, books and toiletries. Friends, the baby box is a powerful symbol of our belief that all children should start life on a level playing field. That's what inclusion means in practice. In our schools, raising the bar for all and closing the attainment gap, opening up opportunity for every child, that's the #1 priority of our government. It is my personal defining mission. That's why we're directing more funding to areas of greatest need. It's why we've announced our intention to reform school governance, to put parents, head teachers and classroom teachers at the centre of decisions about children's learning. It's why we're working with teachers to reduce workload. And it's why we're bringing greater transparency to school performance so that we can measure the attainment gap accurately and set clear targets to close it. But if we are to live up to our ambition, we have a very particular duty to those most in need. We have to get it right for every child. Recently, I've been spending some time with young people who've grown up in care. Some of them are here today. We welcome you to our conference. Their stories have moved me deeply. These young people have challenged me to accept Who Cares Scotland's pledge to listen to 1,000 care experienced young people over the next 2 years, and then to use what they tell me to help make their lives better. I've accepted that challenge. Don't get me wrong, many young people who grow up in care go on to do great things. And the staff and the foster carers who work with looked after kids do an amazing job. Let us thank them publicly today. And real progress is being made. School exclusions are down. The number of children living in permanent rather than temporary placements is up. But we cannot ignore the reality for too many children in care. Only 6% go to university. Nearly half will suffer mental health issues. Half of the adult prison population are people who lived in care when they were growing up. And worst of all, and this breaks my heart, a young person who has been in care is 20 times more likely to be dead by the time they are 25 than a young person who hasn't. Conference, this simply has to change, and I am determined that it will change. So I am going to do what these young people have asked me to do. I am announcing today that we will launch an independent root and branch review of the care system. It will look at the underpinning legislation, practices, culture and ethos, and it will be driven by those and it will be driven by those who have experience of care. Conference, this is not something that any other country has ever done before. We will do it here in Scotland first. You know, the young people who speak to me make a simple but very powerful point. They say the system feels like it is designed only to stop things happening. And of course, it must have safeguards and protections. But children don't need a system that just stops things happening to them. They need one that makes things happen for them. They need a system that supports them to become the people they can be, one that gives them a sense of family, of belonging, of love. My view is simple. Every young person deserves to be loved. So let's come together and make this commitment to love our most vulnerable children and give them the childhood they deserve. That's what inclusion means in practice. Conference, if there is one institution in our country that embodies the values of inclusion and compassion more than any other, it is our precious National Health Service. Today, there are more staff working in the health service than ever before. Our doctors, nurses, auxiliaries, and all of our other health professionals are helping to deliver some of the lowest waiting times and some of the highest satisfaction levels ever recorded in Scotland. So I will never tire of saying this. Our NHS staff, our heroes, each and every one of them, no matter where they were born, deserve our deepest gratitude for the work that they do. Over this Parliament, we will increase health spending by almost £2 billion. That's a necessary commitment, but it is not sufficient. To make our NHS fit for the future, we must reform as well as invest. That will involve tough decisions, but the challenge of an ageing population demands it. It's why our government has integrated health and social care, a challenge ducked by every single administration before us. And it's why we are expanding standalone elective capacity through 5 new treatment centres. But we must go further. The NHS of the future must be built on a real shift from acute care to primary and community care. So the commitment I am making today is a landmark one. By the end of this Parliament, we will increase spending on primary care services to 11% of the frontline NHS budget. That's what doctors have said is needed, and that is what we will deliver. And let me be clear what that means. By 2021, an extra £500 million will be invested in our GP practices and health centres. And it means, for the first time ever, that half of the health budget will be spent not in acute hospitals, but in the community, delivering primary, community and social care, building an NHS that delivers today and for generations to come. That is what our government is determined to do. Friends, today I have set out our determination to build an inclusive Scotland. I've talked about our ambitions for our NHS, our economy, our education system, and our children in care. I've talked about our hopes for the next generation and for the generations that come after that. Hopes and ambitions that are shared by men and women the length and breadth of Scotland. So as we prepare to take the next steps in our nation's journey, whatever they might be, let us always remember this. There is more, much more, that unites us as a country than will ever divide us. Yes voters and no voters, Remainers and Leavers, all of us care deeply and passionately about the future of this nation. So whatever our disagreements, let us always treat each other with respect. And let's work harder to understand each other's point of view. You know, in a strange sort of way, the events of the last few months might help us do just that. I know how upset I was on the morning of the 24th of June as I came to terms with the result of the EU referendum. I felt as if part of my identity was being taken away. And I don't mind admitting that it gave me a new insight into how those who voted no might have felt if 2014 had gone the other way. Likewise, there are many no voters now looking at the Brexit vote with real dismay and wondering if independence might be the best option for Scotland after all. Let's build on that common ground. Let's resolve that whatever decisions we face in the years ahead, we will take them together, respecting each other every step of the way, and let us in the SNP lead by example. You know, this year marks 30 years since I first joined this party of ours. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible when she's still only 25? Or maybe that's just what I'd like you to be thinking. But in all those 30 years, I have never doubted that Scotland will one day become an independent country, and I believe it today. And I believe it today more strongly than I ever have before. But I've always known that it will happen only when a majority of our fellow citizens believe that becoming independent is the best way to build a better future together. So we need to understand why in 2014 that wasn't the case. Some who voted no believed that staying in the UK offered greater economic security, a stronger voice in the world, and a guaranteed place in the EU. Back then, it even seemed possible that there might be a Westminster Labour government at some point in the next 20 years. But the future looks very different today. And make no mistake, it is the opponents of independence, those on the right of the Tory party, intent on a hard Brexit, who have caused the insecurity and the uncertainty. So it falls to us, the advocates of independence, to offer solutions to the problems they have created. Of course, independence would bring its own challenges. That is true for every independent nation on earth. But with independence, the solutions will lie in our own hands. It will be up to us to chart our own course and be the country we want to be, not the country that an increasingly right-wing Tory government wants us to be. I promised at the start of our conference that we will seek to protect Scotland's interests in every way that we can, and we will. We will work with others across the political divide to try to save the UK as a whole from the fate of a hard Brexit. We will propose new powers to help keep Scotland in the single market, even if the UK leaves. But if the Tory government rejects these efforts, if it insists on taking Scotland down a path that hurts our economy, costs jobs, lowers our living standards, and damages our reputation as an open, welcoming, diverse country, then be in no doubt, Scotland must have the ability to choose a better future, and I will make sure that Scotland gets that chance. And let us be clear about this too. If that moment does arise, it will not be because the 2014 result hasn't been respected. It will be because the promises made to Scotland in 2014 have been broken. And above all, it will be because our country decides together that being independent is the best way to build a better, stronger, fairer future for all of us. Friends, we know what kind of country we want Scotland to be. And I believe it's a vision that unites us. An inclusive, prosperous, socially just, open, welcoming, and outward-looking country. The question now, in this new era, is how best to secure it. Let's resolve as a nation to answer that question together. We have already come so far. Our Home Rule journey has given us new confidence, new self-belief, a determination not to be taken backwards, but to finish building tomorrow's Scotland. Friends, the time is coming to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. Let us get on with making that case. Let's get on with building the country we know Scotland can be. Thank you.